everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Staying Connected. I'm excited to tell you that we begin our regathering process this coming Sunday. That is June 28th at 10 o'clock in the morning. We're going to have an in-person service right here at CCTO. A couple things to know about that. We're limited currently to 100 people in attendance at that service, and so we're asking you to make a reservation in advance so we know who's coming. All you got to do is go to our website, ccto.org, and click on the tab at the top that says RSVP. Once you click on that tab, it'll tell you have a reservation, or if the reservations are full, it will ask you if you'd like to be put on a waiting list. I want to encourage you, in fact, I want to strongly encourage you to put yourself on the waiting list, because that will help us determine how many people were actually interested in this week's service and help us determine if we need to go to second service the following week. So please do that for us. That'll really help us out. Today, Marty Milligan's going to come and he's going to bring a devotion for us on written prayer. God bless all of you.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Staying Connected. You know, when we first started doing this, a number of months ago now, the things that we first kind of started doing was some devotions, some encouragements, some things to throw out to you to be thinking about throughout the week. And we've done some different things since then, kind of giving updates on the different things that have been happening here at the church. Giving updates on things about our regathering and all that kind of stuff. And so what we want to do as we move forward is to continue to go back now to offering some more different devotions, things that might encourage you throughout the week and things that might be a challenge. And so this week, actually, I want to do something a little bit different and actually want to introduce you to an author that you maybe have not heard of, and use that as kind of a roundabout way to get to a little bit of a devotion on written prayer and a prayer that I want to read to you and that I hope will be an encouragement and a challenge to you. Well, if I were to pick my favorite author, the person I would pick would probably be Walter Brueggemann. And Walter Brueggemann is really kind of a living legend now. He is 87 years old. He was the professor for a number of years of Old Testament theology at Columbia Theological Seminary. He is the author of countless books, a number of commentaries on different Old Testament books, some popular books as well, and somebody that just has really challenged me, taught me, shaped me in the things that I have read from him. And just to kind of point a couple of them out to you, for if you might be interested, The Prophetic Imagination is probably one of his more popular books and somewhat accessible books. Really an incredibly challenging work. And of course, you know that for a number of years we did some things on spending time in Sabbath. His book, Sabbath as Resistance, is a book that really incredibly challenging book on the ideas of Sabbath. Really one of my favorite ones from him is called Praying the Psalms. It's a short book. Many of his books are actually very short. And that book, Praying the Psalms, read it a few years ago, and probably more than anything else, really challenged and changed my perspective on the Psalms and really kind of shaped the way I spend time in them and really kind of opened them up new to me, and really grateful for that book and what that really did. He is probably in other books that I read, the most often quoted author by other authors as they're going through and writing things. Just an incredible man, credible teacher, pastor, and author. And so you might be thinking, why in the world are you trying to tell me about this 87-year-old author and theologian? Well, the reason that I'm doing that is because there is a real uniqueness about him. I mean, on one hand, you have this guy, incredibly brilliant, writing these, scholarly works, professor, doctorate, all of this kind of stuff, and just this challenging, great intellectual author. And yet at the same time, he's also able to write these accessible books for people in the church. But then even more than that, he is the author of some of these creative, moving, beautiful, and poetic prayers. So it's kind of a unique thing to have somebody that is, so brilliant and scholarly on one hand, and then at the same time able to write these poetic, beautiful, and moving prayers. So to be an intellectual and then also to be incredibly, incredibly creative. And a few years ago, I really kind of discovered the value of written prayer. The fact that you could find these prayers that have been written by others, whether currently or throughout the history of the church, you can find these prayers. And what these prayers can be is really a springboard in your own times of devotion that you spend with God, where you read a prayer and that prayer really kind of inspires and moves you, and then kind of influences the time that you might spend in prayer with God as you read it. So as a source of devotion, and then as a source of encouragement moving you forward in your times of prayer with God. And really one of the things that kind of encouraged me in that and moved me towards that as a source of devotion most was one of Walter Brueggemann's books of prayers called Ode to Heaven, Rooted in Earth. And it was one that I discovered a couple of years ago. And what this is a compilation of prayers. When he would teach his Old Testament theology class at Columbia, he would start out each class with one of these prayers that he would have written. And it would be based on the thing that they would be talking about in that class. And some of his students were so moved by this that they started compiling some of these, and they went to him and really encouraged him, you should compile these prayers and put them out there because they've been so moving to us, and we think it's something that you should share. And so he went together and he did that. And off and on for me now, I've used this book every once in a while as kind of a source for my own time spent in quiet in the mornings with God, where I would read one of these prayers, use it kind of as my own prayer, and then the thing that was written there, what was challenging in there, I would use as kind of my own time of devotion to God. And so what I wanted to do today is read to you one of these prayers. And it happens to actually be the very first prayer in the book, and it's called, And Then You. And here's the prayer. We arrange our lives as best as we can to keep your holiness at bay. With our pieties, our doctrines, our liturgies, our moralities, our secret ideologies, safe, virtuous, settled. And then you and your dreams, you and your visions, you and your purposes, you and your commands, you and our neighbors. We find your holiness not at bay, but probing, pervading, insisting, demanding, and we yield, sometimes gladly, sometimes resentfully, sometimes late or soon. We yield because you, beyond us, are our God. We are your creatures, met by your holiness. By your holiness made our true selves, and we yield. Amen. So really kind of the idea behind that prayer, and then you, is that we as people, we have our ideas. We have our beliefs. We have our things that we just live by, that form us, that make us who we are. And that really even includes God, our sense of who God is and what he really looks like in our lives. And the truth is that we can get stuck in that. We can have this sense that we've got it figured out, that our ideas and the ways that we live, that's just kind of who we are, and we settle into that a little bit. And God really becomes part of that. But the prayer reminds us that God is holy, that God is different, and that when we spend time with God, if we spend time with him in prayer, in quiet time, if we spend time with him in study, if we spend time throughout our days just looking at the things that God is doing all around us, in our community, in our world, the way that he's continuing to kind of move and shape his kingdom, and to bring us to be a part of that, if we pay attention to those things, if we do those things, then what happens is we come face to face with that holiness of God. And when we come face to face with that, God challenges us. He examines us. He really causes us to look at ourselves, to look at our ideas, to look at the things that we hold dear, to kind of look within us and find those places within ourselves that need to be moved, that need to be examined or changed. When we really come face to face with God, He exposes us to the places that we aren't like Him when we deal with others, the ways that we aren't interacting with people in love and mercy in the way that He's called us to, in the example of Jesus. And it really shakes those things up. And if we're willing, then we'll examine those things. We'll look at them. We'll allow God to look at them. And because of that, it'll start to change us, start to grow us, start to make us more like Him. And so if we're willing, God will do those things. You know, to be honest, I can be an incredibly complacent person. I can be somebody that just kind of gets stuck in my ways and does my things. And yet, if I spend time with God, if I'm challenged by Him, if I'm reading things, or if I'm doing things, or if I'm observing things that are going on around me, then God really does kind of shake me up and change me and show me those places that He wants me to grow, to be more loving, and to be more like Him. And that's what that prayer did for me. As I spent time going through and reading it, looking at that prayer, that idea that, and then God would shake up my ideas. And in reading that, it allowed me the opportunity to sit, to be with God, to kind of start to examine some of those places in my life that maybe need to change and grow, and then throughout the day to be able to do the very same thing. And that's just one example of what spending time in a written prayer can really do. And so my encouragement to you this week is to maybe spend a little bit of time with this prayer that I showed you today. It's going to be included on the email that's sent out, and so you can look at it and you can read it. And I would encourage you just to take some time, maybe once or twice during this week, and read it once or twice. And in reading it, allow God to maybe start to penetrate some of the places in your life that He might want to change and examine and cause you to grow and to become more like Him. And if that is something for you that you enjoy, it can really become a catalyst to your own prayer. And then again, if that moves you, I would encourage you and I would challenge you to check this book out, Ode to Heaven, Rooted in Earth. It is filled with prayers that are just like that. All of us here on staff have a copy of it, and many have used it in the same way and have been very moved by those prayers as well. So if you have any questions about that book, if you have any questions about Brueggemann, if you're interested, and maybe others of his works, or if you have any questions about ways to spend time in prayer and in devotion with God, I would just encourage you to contact me. I love having those types of conversations and would really enjoy doing that. So I hope that many of you might spend a little bit of time with this prayer, with God throughout the week, because it is really a challenging one. And if you do, I know that God will work in and challenge your life as you offer that to Him. Well, have a great week, and we are grateful that you take the time to listen to these things. We look forward to seeing some of you in person on Sunday, knowing that many of you will continue to be watching online. Have a great week. Blessings to you.